Madam City Manager.
Hello, sir.
Good afternoon. You ready to get started?
I am ready when you are to call the roll, because
Yes,
we're not
sir.
going to forget it today.
Yes, sir. Mr. Taylor? Ms. Herbert? Dr. Bustles? Mr. Brennan?
Here.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Present.
Mayor Rickaman?
Here.
Thank you.
Y'all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Reverend McDowell, you mind giving us a little word of prayer here before we get going?
I don't mind at all.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let us bow our heads. Gracious and eternal Creator, for this day, for the blessings you've already bestowed upon each of us, as we gather in this place to discuss and to look at the possibilities of this, our city. We simply ask that you might touch each one of us with your finger of wisdom, love. Give us grace to move beyond where we are so that we are able to see the glorious and gracious possibility that this city offers. Bless us individually and collectively. We ask it in your name. Amen. Amen.
So, do we have any changes to the agenda?
Mr. Mayor, we would like to defer item 1, which was the minutes from the February 1st meeting, add ordinance 2021-021 to item 36, receipt of legal advice related to matters covered by attorney-client privilege pursuant to 30-4-78-2, add SC, State of South Carolina, XREL, Alan Wilson, Attorney General versus City of Columbia to item 37, receipt of legal advice pertaining to and threatened or potential claim pursuant to SC Code 30-4-78-2.
And we are deferring item 23 in my request until the next meeting to make sure that we have all the proper information delivered to council. With that, any discussion? Hearing none, Madam Clerk?
And did you second that motion, sir?
Let me ask Howard.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to second it, but let me ask Mr. Duval a question. I think we need to be clear that I think you referred that to item 36.
Item 36 is getting the ordinance 2021-021. We're deferring item 23 at the request of the mayor.
All right, good.
Okay.
Madam
Thank you.
Clerk?
Yes, Mr. Taylor? Ms. Herbert? Dr. Bustles? Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye. Do we have anybody who's here that would like to have any public input on the agenda items only? We have a place at the end of the agenda for any general comments, but is there anyone here who'd like to speak on any of the items before us this evening? Seeing none, hearing none, we'll move forward. We're not approving the minutes today. Those have been deferred, so we'll move to the presentations, Madam City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor. Our first presentation and only presentation today is a smoke-free Palmetto State Certification Award. Mr. Buck Wilson, the South Carolina DHEC Regional Health Director, is present and will come forward.
Thank you so much for having us here today. Again, I'm Buck Wilson. I am the Midlands Public Health Director. There's 4 regions in the state, and I'm in the Midlands as your health director. Before I start, I wanted to introduce a couple of my staff that are here today. Susan Collier, she's the photographer in the back. She's our community systems director. And then Kristen Slocum behind me, she does the tobacco efforts in our region. So they do all the work, and then they asked me to come and present to y'all. So thanks for having us. Again, we're here to present the Smoke-Free Palmetto State certification. To become certified, local governments must adopt and implement clean air protections that prohibit smoking and the use of e-cigarettes and vapes in all indoor workplaces, restaurants, and bars. More than half of South Carolina residents live in places that do not guarantee clean indoor air. So congratulations on being one of the first in the Midlands region for taking specific measures to protect the health of South Carolinians that will help ensure clean air for everyone. Your actions acknowledge that you care about the residents and visitors of Columbia. There's no risk-free level exposure to secondhand smoke or e-vape, e-cigs. So it's truly admirable to see the Columbia City Council at the forefront of protecting public health. So thank you for making Columbia smoke-free. We really appreciate y'all's effort. We appreciate your partnership. And I do have a plaque I'd like to hand over. I don't know if you do pictures during the meeting. Can I pass this to you?
Thank you again, Mr. Wilson. At this time, we'll move into City Council discussion and action. Our first is our normal COVID-19 situational report. Mr. Harry Tinsley, our Emergency Management Director, will come forward for his report. And as Harry does that, I know you all usually ask for our updated numbers. Thank goodness we are seeing a much reduced number of COVID-19 positives in the city employee pool. We're down to a 2% percentage rate, which is so much better, and our vaccination rate remains at 89%. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council, Madam City Manager. As usual, there's additional in your inbox also. So as far as nationally, the newly reported cases and daily hospitalizations are decreasing across the country. Also in our state, we're seeing the same as well. That trend, that downward trend is what we were hoping for, and we're continuing to move in that direction. Forecasting models from CDC indicate a continued decrease in cases and deaths over the next 4 weeks, both nationally and in our state. So as far as the case counts today, our cumulative case count as the report out today is 1.4 million. And it's also noted that there have been over 15.3 million tests in our state. That's over 90, I think it's over 90 or 91% of the population has at least been tested. Also, the numbers today, case counts cumulative of 1,210, and the percent positive on that sample was 11.5. And you'll notice our last meeting we were over 23%. So we're trending in a positive direction. Unfortunately, there were 2 additional deaths that were reported out by DHEC today, and that brings the cumulative count to 16,243 for our state. Here in Richland County, we have over 95,000 confirmed cases. Today's numbers were 94 that reported out, and we're seeing a continued downward trend in that as well. As of the February 9th report for the 14-day recent disease activity rate, all 46 counties are now decreasing as well. Hospitalizations, the bed utilization rate is stable at 77%. And as of the 14th of February, there were 1,371 patients hospitalized due to COVID-19 confirmed or suspected. And here in Richland County, the bed utilization rate is stable as well at 67% with 89 COVID patients currently being hospitalized. In Prisma Health Children's Hospital, there are 7 COVID-19 pediatric patients as of that report out. Also, DEC reports over 6.6 million doses of COVID-19 vaccinations have been administered to our state. Here in Richland County, 56.5% have completed their vaccination series, and also the national, from the CDC, those 68.5% of the U.S. population, 5 or older, have been fully vaccinated. And also, we have a vaccination clinic today, runs at our Woodland Park, which is off Old Knight Parkway. And also, lastly, the COVID-19 testing and vaccinations site at Columbia Place Mall is still running to capacity. And that concludes my report.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Tinsley? Numbers going down, looks good. Thank you, Harry.
Thank you, Harry. At this time, we are really excited to have our federal lobbying team in town. I know several of you have been able to meet with Ralph. We will ask him to come forward, as well as Ms. Deborah Dehaney Howard. Our federal legislative briefing, Mr. Ralph Garbushian, Capital Edge LLC, and Ms. Deborah Dehaney Howard with Capital Edge. They're both our federal lobbyists.
Good afternoon. Thank you. It's good to be here in Columbia. I'll really quickly introduce my colleague, Deborah Dehaney Howard.
She likes to hide.
So this is actually, the PowerPoint is actually much longer than I would like, but I'm going to try to go through it quickly and leave time for Q&A. Thank you. So this is just a slide, just a little bit of background about our firm. We've represented Columbia. I came on board since in 1995, and that actually predates me. Our firm is a small one. We only represent local governments and local government agencies, have a lot of expertise on federal city relations, and provide a full array of services. So this is just a quick overview of some of the key dates of the second session of the 117th Congress. So we're going to, we're now actually in late February, so we're under the year. Right now, the big piece of work that Congress is looking to conclude on is FY 2022 appropriations. We're 4.5 months into the fiscal year, and they are still negotiating that budget. But right now, there's a continuing resolution keeping the government running through February 18th. The House last week passed another one that will run through March 11th, and the Senate is taking that up this week. As of late last week, early this week, the news is that they have an agreement and that they are going to complete work on the FY 2022 budget, which then brings us to this calendar. In early March, I think the President will deliver a State of the Union address, and soon before or after will release his FY 2023 budget. That will get the FY 2023 budget process going. Right around the same time as the National League of Cities meeting, when some of you will come in, and that's an opportunity to talk about some of the city's priorities. And then really the rest of the year will be focused on that FY 2023 appropriations process. The fiscal year ends on September 30th, and October 1st, FY 2023 begins. Of course, this is an election year, so election years are always tough years to get anything done, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. And of course, mid-December is the target adjournment. So a quick overview, I'm going to talk mostly about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Implementation of that over the next 5 years, I think, is going to be the main priority. I have it with a question mark, and I prepared this presentation 2 weeks ago to meet the deadline. I think that question mark is even more of a question mark now. I'll talk quickly about FY 2022 appropriations, FY 2023 appropriations, and then a quick review. Even though it's an election year, Congress is looking to get some work done on a few other issues. So a quick summary of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, choose your name. It's really best understood as 3 bills wrapped into one. Divisions A through C are the regular 5-year reauthorization of highway and transit programs that Congress would have done anyway and were due to do. And that's roughly just shy of half of the bill. Divisions D through I of the bill are authorize a whole array of other infrastructure investments, broadband, water and sewer, cybersecurity, hydropower, other alternative energy. So it's a big ranging bill. And then Division J is a 5-year advanced appropriations bill that provides about $520 billion for a lot of those programs. So talking really quickly about the reauthorization, Divisions A through C, it's generally a status quo bill, but a status quo bill that provides pretty sizable increases across those categories. So you see there 26% increase in highways, 36% increase in the average yearly funding for transit, and then a really big increase, but from a low baseline, 140% for intercity passenger rail programs. And it's a status quo bill, and so most of those funds will continue to go by formula to state DOTs, metropolitan planning organizations, transit agencies, and Amtrak. This is a little bit out of date, but this is just a comparison of annual highway allocations to South Carolina. And so you see that that's a pretty sizable increase from FY 2021 to FY 2022. And that actually, just last week, the DOT released the allocations for the electric vehicle formula program, so you can actually add to that $941 million, but you see that that's South Carolina's share of that 26% increase in highways. This is, and take this with a very big grain of salt, this is me just using the percentage increases and doing math, and even with help from Excel, my math is suspect, but for working purposes and for broad planning purposes, you can kind of see the Surface Transportation Block Grant. Central Midlands Council of Government will go from $12.6 million to an annual average of $14.9 million under this bill. Your Transportation Alternatives Program suballocation to the COG will go from $900,000 to about $1.6 million. The COMET CMRTA will see a pretty sizable increase in its formula allocations. So although it's a status quo bill, it does include some new programs, mostly targeted to climate resiliency and community impacts, including the PROTECT, which is a formula and competitive program, Reconnecting Communities, and carbon reduction. And then this is a chart. It's a little bit of an overwhelming chart, but it's the first page on a summary that we prepared of all of the competitive transportation grant programs. And these will be funded over the next 5 years. And this is about $20 billion a year that will be available for competitive transportation grants across these various categories. This is the water and wastewater, a broad summary of some of the water and wastewater investments that the infrastructure bill makes. And these are all money that will be allocated by formula to the states, and South Carolina to DHEC through the Drinking Water and Clean Water State Revolving Loan Funds. And just to put the $11.7 billion in perspective, that's just the basic Drinking Water and Clean Water Revolving Loan Funds, those receive about $1 billion a year in regular annual appropriations. So those are big infusions into the revolving loan funds. And then, of course, there's the extra $15 billion for lead service line replacement and extra funding in both revolving loan funds for emerging contaminants. This is a quick summary of some of the energy provisions and grant programs that are included in the bill. And I have to take a moment to, Deborah and I work for local governments, and so we're a little bit biased in favor of local governments. And I have to take the first line item there, energy efficiency and conservation block grants. In a $1.2 trillion bill, that's the only money allocated directly to local governments in this bill. So out of $1.2 trillion, $550 million will be allocated directly to local governments, and that's a formula grant program. It was first funded back in FY 2009 as part of the Recovery Act. It was a nice little win to get this in the infrastructure bill, but I think looking forward, and I'll talk a little bit about that, it'd be nice to get that funded as part of the annual appropriations process. and then some of the other energy provisions. Broadband is a big piece of this bill. There's just over $60 billion over 5 years for broadband. The bulk of that will go out to the states by formula through that first program you see there, the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Grant Program. But there are these other smaller, and it's all relative, but in the bill of this scale, smaller is still pretty large, grant programs, some of which I think the city might be able to tap into. When I will mention the State and Local Cybersecurity Grant Program, that's a new program, and the name pretty much says what it's for. And then just some of the other investments authorized and funded in IIJA, it includes $1.5 billion over 5 years for brownfields. That's, again, to put that number in perspective, brownfields is funded at about $90 million a year via regular annual appropriations. $3.5 billion for the Weatherization Assistance Program. That goes to the states by formula and then down to community action agencies. Again, weatherization most years is funded at about $100 million, so that's a big infusion of funding into that program. And then some programs that might be of interest to the school districts for clean school buses and building energy efficiency. Next steps, and I think a lot of you are familiar with these next steps, but there's going to be a lot of rulemakings, a lot of guidance, a lot of parameters set for a lot of these formula and competitive grant programs, and we just have to keep on top of those, review grant opportunities, and beginning developing plans to apply or not to apply based on the city's priorities and what's the best fit. And we've prepared detailed summaries of a lot of these grant programs across all these categories, and I think the purpose there is to help the city identify what city priorities match best with those programs. And of course, you all are familiar with these. Regional support is important, community support from the business community and from other stakeholders, and of course, the congressional delegation is always critical. So I'm going to talk about Build Back Better really quickly. I think at this point it's pretty well acknowledged that the House has passed Build Back Better, but it's pretty much on life support at this point in the Senate. But Build Back Better at its broadest level is $1.75 trillion in new spending across a broad array of categories, and then changes to the tax code that would increase revenue and make changes such as the child tax credit and other similar provisions. In terms of next step on Build Back Better, the leadership is looking at maybe breaking it apart into pieces that could get 51 votes in the Senate, and they're looking for a path forward on those, but a lot of that is TBD. So I'll go through these slides quickly, but I think it's important this is the bill as passed by the House, just some of the investments that were included in Build Back Better. So particularly for the city, $6.6 billion for CDBG, that would have come directly to local governments. $34.7 billion for home is part of a pretty historic investment in housing, and just some of the other provisions that were included in Build Back Better. Talking really quickly about FY 2022 appropriations, I mentioned the current continuing resolution expires on February 18th, which is this week. But the House has passed another one that runs through March 11th. Senate is set to pass that. And as of late last week, the Appropriations Committees announced that they had a broad agreement on the top line numbers and are looking to craft an omnibus appropriations bill to complete the FY 2022 process. If there is an agreement, I think most programs of interest to cities should see modest increases in FY 2022. If there's a year-long CR, the real danger there is that it could complicate implementation of the infrastructure bill. So a lot of those programs I talked about in IIJA could be delayed or even stymied completely if Congress does not pass an FY 2022 appropriations bill. So it is important for implementation of the infrastructure bill. FY 2022 was the first time earmarks made a return. It was much different from the previous era of earmarks. It was very constrained. In the House, members were limited to 20 projects across all the appropriations bills and could reasonably expect to get 4 or 5 funded. Pending in the House and Senate appropriations bills, one of the city's requests was funded, and that was $709,000 for body-worn and in-car camera modernization that Senator Graham secured. So as I mentioned earlier, the FY 2023 appropriations process will start with the President's budget proposal in early March, And as some of you know, now is really the time to start advocating for local priorities. The NLC meeting in March provides an opportunity to do that, as well as other meetings over the course of the year, but advocating for CDBG, home, and others. And I put the energy efficiency and conservation block grant in bold. We got that in the infrastructure bill, and I'd really like to see that just included in annual appropriations bills. It would be a nice win for cities across the nation. I mentioned earmarks. I think that the parameters for FY 2023 are going to be similar. So in the House, each member was limited to 20 requests. Each member of those 20 can reasonably expect to have 2 to 4 included in the final appropriations bill, and the projects are in the $100,000 to $4 million range. And they're limited to specific programs, and these are just some of the examples: police technology, water and sewer, transportation, and economic and community development. So a quick review of other issues, and I actually have 2 to add here, but of course the January 6th committee in the House is taking up a lot of time and attention. In the Senate, at least for March and April, I think the Supreme Court nomination will take up a lot of time, and of course the Senate continues to just kind of churn through judicial nominations. That's something they can do with 51 votes and are doing with 51 votes on a pretty regular basis each week. Just last week, the House passed the COMPETE Act. The Senate passed its version of that last year. That's the big, when I say big, $50 to $60 billion bill that would invest in research and development, domestic semiconductor industry, supply chains, all with an eye towards China. For local governments, there's the CHIPS Act, which would support local government efforts to attract semiconductor manufacturing. And then supply chain provisions, and of course, there's buried in there is a sister cities transparency provision. At this point, that would just be a general accountability office study, but it would look at our sister city relationships, an avenue for China spying on the United States. So, of course, the previous administration had a pretty aggressive deregulatory agenda. I think the current administration has an equally aggressive regulatory agenda, focused on clean air, clean water. Not so much the FCC yet, but of course, whenever the FCC starts taking action, local governments need to be aware of any efforts to preempt local authority. And then I would add to these, just last week, the House passed a postal service reform bill, and that's on the Senate floor this week and into next week. And that's essentially a big postal service reorganization bill that could include some post office consolidations and other impacts that we'd have to track. And then I think that's it. I'm happy to take any questions. I went through a lot quickly.
Anybody have any questions for Ralph? Mr. Brennan?
Ralph, thank you so much. It was wonderful meeting you today. A lot of money heading to states and municipalities and counties. Let's see here, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, those are competitive grant applications?
So yes, and so a lot of it is formula, but there are a lot of competitive grant programs in there as well.
So a lot more grants are being written by City of Columbia's than in the past, correct?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson, my question is, who writes the grants with this onslaught of grants coming up that we could potentially go after? Is it staff department-based, or do we have, what's our system for working with Ralph, identifying which grants to go after and actually going after them?
So back when the stimulus occurred many years ago, I was probably pretty new to the city and doing governmental affairs, and that was when we first brought on a grants writer, Mr. Brennan, and she was on a contract basis. We had so many opportunities back then to apply for, similar to what we're finding right now. We need to bring on consultants or staff to help us to be efficient in applying for these opportunities, for sure.
Absolutely. Ralph, is that something you could help us with? I'm sure there's some grant writers
There
floating
are.
around DC that you could send our way.
Absolutely.
That'd be wonderful. Very exciting stuff. Thank you, Ralph.
It's a good time to be a grant writer, though.
Anybody else? Howard?
Ralph, good to see you again,
Good to see you.
and Deborah, glad to have you in Columbia again also. The 709,000 for the body worn and in-car camera modernization, has that been funded or is that pending?
It's pending. It's pending.
Is that the only project that the city of Columbia has pending?
Yes, yes, in the appropriations bills, yes.
The other things, the 4 million for bike path and connectivity with the Greenway got cut out. So it's
That-
not there.
Yeah, so the transportation earmarks that were in the House reauthorization bill, they went away along with, the House Transportation Reauthorization Bill included $6 billion in projects for members, and those went away when the Senate and the White House negotiated the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act.
Did we swap the greenways for a Supreme Court justice?
No, it was across the board. All of those House projects didn't make it into the final bill. So it wasn't unique to Columbia or South Carolina.
I did want to make a statement that I know the city manager is working now, interviewing different potential partners for grant writing and application process to help us, because there is a tremendous amount that is going to be task-oriented, especially around getting grants, especially competitive grants, so that we want to make sure we're ahead of the curve on that, and that we have a pretty strong application process so that we have the best chance to leverage all these opportunities. So that'll be one that's moving forward. Anybody else have anything for Ralph? Deborah?
I wanted to ask at the
Yeah.
end, Ralph, you said something about post office consolidation. Can you speak to that?
Sure, the House passed it this past week, so I haven't had a chance to actually, to even skim the bill, but I've read the summary of it. But essentially, the Postal Service has a 10-year plan, and it calls for some pretty major changes to a lot of post office consolidations, not necessarily retail. It actually calls for new retail locations and upgraded retail locations, but a lot of their processing centers would be consolidated. At congressional insistence, the plan, I think they were wise. They've backtracked on moving to 5-day-a-week delivery. It calls for 6-day-a-week delivery to continue, and that's part of the legislation is for that to do. And the big thing the bill does is the Postal Service has obligations that no other entity has in terms of retiree health care. So essentially, it takes care of that liability for the Postal Service. And going forward, future Postal Service hires will all be required to contribute to Medicare and be part of Medicare.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Ralph.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks for coming down.
Good to be in
Appreciate it.
Columbia.
Thank you, Deborah.
Ralph and Deborah, thank you so much. I know Juana has done a great job of hosting you all for us and
wonderful.
helping, and I mean, we just hope to see you soon, if not in DC, but virtually, because we've clearly got a lot of opportunities
It's
ahead
going to
of
be a
us.
busy year, yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. I know Juana has something for you all from us. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Juan.
Thank you. Ready, Mayor?
That brings us to the consent agenda.
Yes, sir. Consent agenda items 5 through 14 for your consideration.
Is there a motion?
So move, Mr.
Do we have a second? Any discussion, questions, comments? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, do you read the roll, please?
Mr. Taylor, Ms. Herbert, Dr. Bustles, Mr. Brennan.
Yes.
Mr. McDowell,
Yes.
Mr. Duval,
Aye.
Mayor Benjamin. Sorry,
He's
Mayor
not here.
Rickaman. I was doing good.
That 2 times.
Had to lighten the,
Aye.
had to lighten the mood. Thank you.
We're moving to a period of ordinances first reading. Ordinance number 2022-009, authorizing the city manager to execute a Ninth Amendment to lease between the City of Columbia and Old Boy Properties LLC for property consisting of over 100 acres in Richland County, being a portion of the property formerly owned by Columbia Venture LLC and Sunday School LLC.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Questions? Hearing none, seeing none. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Taylor? Ms. Herbert? Dr. Bustles? Aye. Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Thank you.
Event resolutions, these all have the safety plans that adhere to the COVID-19 pandemic protocols as published by the CDC and South Carolina DHEC. They've been reviewed and approved by our Columbia Police Department. The first event is resolution number R 2022-008, authorizing consumption of beer and wine only at Live on Lincoln fundraiser for the arts on Sunday, April 24, 2022, with a rain contingency date of Sunday,
Motion to
May
approve.
1st.
Second.
Any discussion? Not seeing or hearing none. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Taylor? Ms. Herbert? Dr. Bustles? Aye. Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Item 17, resolution number R 2022-009, authorizing consumption of beer and wine only at Artista Vista Crafty Feast on Sunday, April 24th, 2022.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Any discussion, questions? Seeing none, hearing none. Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Mr. Taylor? Ms. Herbert? Dr. Bustles? Aye. Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Item 18, resolution number R 2022-010, authorizing consumption of beer and wine only at the Columbia Food and Wine Festival in the 1600 block of Blanding Street on Sunday, April 3rd, 2022.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Is there any discussion, any questions? Not seeing or hearing none. Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Mr. Taylor? Ms. Herbert? Dr. Bustles? Aye. Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Item 19, resolution number R 2022-011, authorizing consumption of beer and wine only at the 2022 First Annual Artistic Showcase Festival at Maxie Gregg Park, 1651 Park Circle on Saturday, April 9, 2022. The rain contingency date.
Second?
Any questions, concerns? Hearing and seeing none. Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Mr. Taylor? Ms. Herbert? Dr. Bustles? Aye. Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Item 20 is resolution number R 2022-014, authorizing consumption of beer and wine only at the Rocky Shoal Spider Lily Happy Hours at Saluda River Walk, 650 Candy Lane on Tuesdays.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Any kind of concerns or questions? Seeing none, hearing none. Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Mr. Taylor? Ms. Herbert? Dr. Bustles?
Aye.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Item 21, resolution number R 2022-015, authorizing consumption of beer and wine only at the Columbia Food and Wine Festival Mixer on Main, satellite event at Boyd Plaza, 1515
Motion to
Main
approve.
Street.
Second?
Any questions, concerns? Hearing none, seeing none. Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Mr. Taylor? Ms. Herbert? Dr. Bustles?
Aye.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Moving into a period of other matters, item 22, council is asked to approve the installation of 17 streetlights within the Belvedere community as requested by the
So
Public
moved.
Works Department.
Second.
Any questions, concerns? Hearing none, seeing none. Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Mr. Taylor? Ms. Herbert? Dr. Bustles?
Aye.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I have just a moment of personal privilege?
You may, Reverend McDowell,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
but you cannot pass the plate. We're gonna,
I will if you let me. Let me just say a personal word for the community members of the Belvedere area, of which Ms. Wiley. Ms. Wiley is the president, very vocal, passionate, lady who loves her community. We are very happy with the help of Dominion and, of course, Robert Anderson, providing this in our community. Thank you so very, very much for your leadership and for your help. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mayor Rickaman, I know that Ralph and Deborah are going to have to head out on a flight. Do you all mind taking a quick photo with them before
Oh,
they leave
absolutely
out?
not.
And as you
Of course.
prepare to take on your appointments?
Be a good, as they say in church, a moment of interruption.
Don't take my word back.
Come on, y'all.
Oh,
Okay. Thank you all for doing that. We appreciate you. Mayor Rickaman and I both communicated, I'm sure, to all of you regarding the list of before you for appointments, which these are actually your appointments of each other. These are the appointments of city council members to special committees, task forces, or commissions of the council, as you'll see listed, which there are several, and then another list of the external boards or commissions on which city council members have seats. And I know that the mayor's intention today and hope is that you all will, look at these as a group. If you're not able to make your way through all of them, that is understandable, but we certainly would like to give it a try. And Ashley and I are here to help if you need any assistance.
Mayor, what procedure we going to work off Ashley's sheet or what?
Well, we've got, starts with Advisory Committee on Equality, right?
Well, mine starts with the administrative policy. Oh, that's a standing
I'm reading
committee.
the agenda.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yep. Ms. Jenkins or Ms. Wood had sent all of you a memo or two or three, and the memos detail for many of them that we have information on the backup material to explain what the committee or task force or commission might be. Some of them are new, and so, there wouldn't be any membership on those yet, and so you need to work through that in a different manner. But again, the first item 24 is the Advisory Committee on Equality.
Mr. Mayor, Mrs. Devine and I were co-chairs of that committee, and my thought about the committee going forward is that the committee elects its own leadership, and we have a council person assigned to that committee to coordinate with the council. And I would volunteer to be that person if you want to do it that way.
My understanding is that when we put it together, that it was a task force, so it has a period of time to do its mission. If we're going to change the structure, what I would suggest is that we take it to the administrative committee, because it's going to need bylaws and everything else to move forward. Because right now, it was to be, I hate to use the word blue ribbon, but that's essentially how we had moved it forward.
I think we did bylaws.
That was at the very beginning too, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
To do it. All right.
Well, I would move that we send it to the administrative committee to work on.
Is there a
Is there-
second?
Second.
Anybody else having discussion on that? We could read the roll on that motion to move the ACE committee to the administrative committee to come up with some policies and procedures for it to move forward.
Yes, sir.
Interest of the public. Is there a way to distinguish, are certain things called certain types of committees when they are ad hoc or temporary versus a standing committee? Because being a newer member, I'm not seeing that distinction, and I just want to make sure the public knows as well which ones were maybe mission-driven and temporary versus those that have been around for a while.
Well, I think as we'll go through them, they are in our book. We don't have it on here, but we can talk through each one of those as
That'd be
we move
helpful.
forward.
Yes, sir. Mr. Taylor?
Voting to send it to committee?
Yes, sir.
Aye.
Ms. Herbert? Dr. Bustles?
Aye.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Correct.
And to put structure to it if it does not.
Yeah.
As a part of that task.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
And there would be clarification during that process of it being a standing committee and all of that, or if it's just to serve a certain purpose, all of that will be discussed.
I think it needs to be clarified and then
Yes.
brought to full council, because it seems to be our understanding and the way it's been in the book, obviously, that it was mission-driven. And it seems like some folks think it might be a standing and this and that. So whichever way it goes, it needs some clarification, because I know that when we were trying to put all this together to figure out, we didn't have any bylaws, we didn't have any process. And if it's going to be a third-party committee coming back and council's only going to be a member, then, there has to be some guidelines of what we expect on that as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 25 is the Affordable Housing Task Force.
And this, again, is one of our special committees that was put together really to help move forward. And I know that there's been groundwork done, but I think we're looking for this committee to come together and really help us set forth some more guidelines and some pushing forward so that we can make that impact that we all know is needed, but making sure that we're gathering and staying up to date. And I know that we're looking for a replacement for the chair of that committee from council.
Do you want to send this to the same administrative committee to work on and bring it back at the same time?
I think it would, Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, Howard.
I was just asking the mayor a question.
So Mr. Duval wanted to see if their will was to send it to administrative to give it some stronger guidelines and decide if this should be a standing committee or if this will be a task-oriented committee.
Well, initially it was blue ribbon, if that's the right word for that. I think what we're asking to do is to clearly define what the committees are and the role that they might play in not only just a temporary fix, but something that has some permanency attached to it.
I think both of those committees, the ACE Committee and Affordable Housing, are going to be ongoing needs of the council to have a group looking at those two subjects. So I'd like to send it to the administrative committee to
Similarly to the
ACE
Equality.
committee.
Mr. Mayor, can I make a motion to appoint a new chair and then send it to the administrative committee?
Well,
I'd like to nominate Councilwoman Tina Herbert as the chair for the Affordable Housing Task Force.
Is there a second?
I have
for
a
that
question
nomination?
before we,
Yes, sir.
again, being new and not here when it was formed, my understanding, at least I thought, was that this was a committee formed to develop a report to city council, not an ongoing thing. And so the question would be, where are we, does anybody have an idea where we might be with regards to finalizing that report and turning it in?
Ms. Herbert, turn your mic on.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
That's
thank
for,
you.
While I'm not on the committee, I've actually watched all of the meetings since, I think, February, because I do have a special interest in it. What I would recommend is, since they have been meeting prior to sending it to a committee, to appoint a chair who can bring you all what the current status is with a recommendation of how it moves forward. Because I don't, what I'm concerned about is we have a group of people who've been working for about a year or so, and I don't want it to go to a committee and then we switch the whole plan on them. I think they do need to have some kind of conclusion or put a pin on it and come back with some recommendations, whether or not it is we need to continue to monitor or not, but that would be my recommendation.
And I think that's part of why we're having this discussion tonight, is to come up with some type of direction. I believe we were looking for a full report, task plan, and a completion. I don't think that they're there yet. I know a lot of work's been done identifying terms and also looking at the overall picture, but I don't believe that we're at a place that we could say that they were, from what I understand, halfway there yet. I mean,
I think one of the most important things that I think they were getting close to, I don't know if they finally got there, is just a goal for what we wanted to do every year. I think that is pretty critical, because we do need to have an idea of what the numbers that we need to hit to start dealing with the crisis that we have. And I think that they have enough information that they can establish a goal and present to council.
do you have something, Mr. Davis?
Mr. Mayor, kind of echoing on what Ms. Herbert said, I personally don't have an issue with appointing an interim council member as the chairman, but having seen this was designed to come back with recommendations and such. It was not designed to be the committee, I don't think, to implement those recommendations. And I think once we get the report back, in other words, so I would not like to see us change the way this is set up, wait to receive the report back from the committee, and then make the decision whether or not it's an ongoing, whether a new affordable housing committee is created. That's and the reason I bring this up, and it's no reflection on any of the members, I think it was mostly providers that were made up this committee, and we may want to broaden the membership some to include developers and other types of housing experts and so forth. And frankly, involve the real estate community as well, because, again, I think we should probably hold at bay until we get the report. And I have no issue with making a substitute motion if Mr. Brennan would allow that we appoint Ms. Herbert as the chairman of this committee through the final report due to council.
Would you accept that, Will?
And that means short term, so
I think it's a good point.
And Ms. Herbert, you and I didn't discuss this, so if I don't want to mean to put you in any place you don't want to be. But I think it's timely for us to call for the question, for lack of a better description, on this study and get the report into council and see what we need to do. We're in an interesting situation that our current executive director of our housing authority is heading to the West Coast, So I think if we can get this thing brought to a conclusion as we search for a housing authority director, it's a chance for us to make some real positive movement in the affordable and attainable housing situation in Columbia, South Carolina.
Question.
Is,
Mr. Mayor Pro Tem?
Is it still necessary? And of course, I agree with that substitute motion. I'm a little reluctant, a little bit, whether or not we're going to do that on an interim basis. Would the administrative committee still be involved after hearing such a report, that if we elect to nominate on a permanent basis, Ms. Herbert, we could very well do that?
Absolutely.
Mr. Mayor, let me, for clarification, that motion said, didn't you, I took the word interim out, Reverend McDowell.
You
and said
took that out?
It would be the chairman through the
report.
Yeah, I'll withdraw
turning into the
my
final
motion.
report.
Mr. Brennan, so we're all in agreement at this point, where we have a nomination on the floor for Ms. Herbert to be the chairperson for the Affordable Task Force through the end of the report that gets submitted. At that point, we will take that report, and then we'll disseminate that and decide on how to move forward. And if we feel like we need to continue the committee, we will do that at that point.
So move, Mr. Mayor.
I think it's inherent in what you all are saying that you want a report. I do not think that directive was ever given to that task force. So as part of your motion, do you want to make that clear, that that is what you're expecting, is a report? And I guess Ms. Herbert would help determine what is in this report? The committee hasn't, as they've worked, and I've listened to the majority and the staff has participated, but there's no report
All right, Mr.
as
Mayor.
of yet.
So that's,
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to amend my motion.
you've already,
You
No,
amend- you
Mr. Brennan withdrew his.
yes.
So I'm going to amend my motion to say I make the motion that we place Ms. Herbert in as the chairman of this task force, and that she lead her committee to bring a report and recommendations to city council.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any more discussion? Congratulations, Ms. Herbert.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Herbert?
Aye.
Dr. Bustles? Mr. Brennan? Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Thank you. Item 26, the Columbia-Fort Jackson Joint Committee on Cooperation.
Ms. Wilson, before we move on to that, just a point of clarification.
Yes,
Was
ma'am.
there a deliverable or report or something due from the ACE committee as well? Or was that built around a particular piece of legislation? Because if we're going to, I think that this is a great model to ensure that we are using our committees and task force to their full potential. And, you know, Councilman Duval, it'd be great if we could get up to speed the administrative committee on any recommendations or things that have come out of that committee to understand what the future of ACE would look like.
I think that's why we wanted to send it to administratives, to give it some guidelines.
So nothing's happened?
It was formed.
Okay, that was my question. Okay.
So that it has a specific task and that we know what the deliverables are for the council then, but that's why we were going to send it, just to be clarified. I'm sorry if I wasn't clear about that.
Okay.
I think they may have met one time
That's
versus
my-
the Affordable Housing Task Force met very often, and it begun to do some background work, but not the ACE.
As you know, mayors change, generals change every 3 years, garrison commanders change, but trying to put together a team where we're working with staff at Fort Jackson on a constant basis so that we're both working the greater good. As he reminded me, this is the gateway for the Americans military coming through. But we have more and more military families moving here and being part of our community and making sure that we're working together so that we have a much better relationship than we've had in the past. And there's a lot of good things I know that have been worked with the Chamber of Commerce and others, but he specifically were talking together about making this joint committee so it's something that would last ongoing through political wins and others. We had it set up. What I'd like to know is there, who would like to be on this committee? Obviously, we set it up for the mayor to appoint 3. I'd love for, volunteers to be part of that so that it's something you really want to be involved with. I'd love to have a chairperson and 2 folks.
District 4 has probably the.
Well, you're surrounded.
Yeah.
District 3, so do we have one more?
Let me do that.
All right, so with that, I would nominate Mr. Taylor, Mr. Brennan, and Reverend McDowell to the committee. Who would like to serve as the chair for that?
I think the
Mr.
mayor ought to
Taylor?
serve. I think the mayor ought to serve as the chairman of that one. That's how important I think Fort Jackson is to us.
So we have created up just so you know, we've created a regional meeting that we're meeting, and we've invited the general to do that, so we'll be meeting with him one-on-one.
Still think the mayor ought to be the chairman of this.
I will attend the meetings, but, so let's nominate these, and then we'll talk about the chairman structure, if that would be good. So that's my motion. Can I get a second?
Second.
Madam Clerk, can you read the roll?
Yes. Mr. Taylor? Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Herbert? Dr. Bustles?
Aye.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next committee is the Council Legislative Committee.
So we were looking for 2 council members to serve, working on an ongoing basis with our state legislature.
I nominate Mr. Taylor.
There's a nomination for Mr. Taylor from Mr. Duval on the floor. Any other nominations? I can't hear you.
I was just pointing.
Do you want to nominate Dr. Bustles?
Yes.
There's a nomination for Dr. Bustles. Is there a second for those 2 nominations? Any further discussion?
And the mayor.
Read the roll, Madam Clerk.
Yes, sir. Mr. Taylor? Mr. Taylor. Ms. Herbert? Dr. Bustles?
Aye.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Thank you.
The next committee.
Yes, sir. The next is the Richland County City of Columbia Committee.
Meeting with the new chairman and the vice chair, they really wanted to get a working group together that didn't involve the mayor or the chairman or vice chairman. They really wanted to get council members working together to have a better relationship as we move forward, and meeting on a quarterly basis so that we can be talking issues at every level. There seemed to be some concern from years past that there wasn't a lot of discussion between council members, and both the chair and the vice chair really thought it would be a great idea to form this committee. So we're looking for 3 members of city council to be on this working committee. As I said, it will only meet on a quarterly basis.
Now, Mayor, the write-up says the mayor and 2 council members.
That says that on the legislative, it says 3 on Richland County.
I tried.
Mr. Mayor. I'd like to nominate Councilwoman Tina Herbert.
I have a nomination for Ms. Herbert,
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to nominate Mr. Brennan.
and we have seatmates nominating. There we go. Mr. Brennan.
I nominate Ms. Bustles.
And we have a nomination for Ms. Bustles. So with that, can we get a second for those nominations?
Second.
Can I, and I'm going to just make a comment real quick on that.
Yep.
In today's discussions with our federal lobbyists, one of the things that came about in a fairly important way is our ability to align ourselves with Richland County a little bit more on our federal and some state, but federal request in particular. I don't know if we've done a very good job of that in the past, and I just, again, would just say to the council members who are willing to do this, I think this, especially in the money times that we're in now, could be one of the most important things that we will undertake as a council. I vote aye.
This is for the Richland County Committee. Ms. Herbert?
Aye.
Dr. Bustles?
Aye.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 29 is the Task Force to Prevent and End Homelessness.
If you've had an opportunity to read it, this structure will be, we're going to create a task force. As you know, homelessness has become an increasing issue and discussion, and we really want to work a way to not only create a real path forward. Obviously, you know, ending homelessness is a tall order, but really to prevent and integrate working with the community, coming up with a plan that benefits all citizens, especially those folks who are suffering from homelessness, but also to make sure that we're accounting for all our communities, our neighborhoods, our business community as well. And as you listen to it, we want to have appoint 3 council members, one being named the chair, the chief of police, the president of Five Points Association, the president of Elmwood Association, the executive director of City Center Partnership, 2 additional citizens to develop a plan to address the homeless on the street, panhandling, and other issues arising from homeless population in the city. The mission of the task force is to prevent and end homelessness, to be looked at who is providing homeless services, location of homelessness providers, where the homeless in Columbia congregate, funding sources, and economic impacts. This committee is to bring recommendations back to council for us to look at and discuss on how we move forward, working with those providers to make sure that we're seeing end results in that. And we're also moving to get people into housing, care if there's addiction, making sure that we're addressing mental health and so forth, but really making sure that we're creating back the quality of life for all citizens, including those folks who are suffering. So we're looking for 3 members of council.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to nominate Dr. Bustles as chairman.
I have a nomination for Dr. Bustles as the chair.
I would like to nominate Reverend McDowell as a member of the committee.
I have a nomination for Reverend McDowell.
And I nominate Will Brennan.
And I have a nomination of Will Brennan. Is there a second those motions? I'll second it. Is there any discussion? Y'all, this is probably one of the most important committees as we struggle as homelessness is spread through district and sources from other. There's going to be opportunities at the federal level and other folks to help us create a plan. We have a lot of information, a lot of data, using our 911 and other opportunities, but I think working with these executive directors, the chief of police and other folks, I think we have a real opportunity to have a strategic plan to help us move forward. So I thank all of y'all who have agreed to serve on this. And as you know, we're looking for this to be a precise and committee with some action items delivered to us within 180 days. So thank you. Madam Clerk, could you read the roll, please?
Mr. Mayor, one question on
Yes.
So just this particular committee will terminate in 180 days.
At the end of 6 months.
Yes.
We'll let the minutes reflect that. I vote aye.
Okay. Did we get a second on that? I apologize.
I seconded it, I believe.
Yeah, the mayor seconded it.
All right, thank you.
I'll second it and vote aye.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Ms. Herbert?
Aye.
Dr. Bustles?
Aye.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
And Mayor,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add, Mayor, recommend if you could consider Michael Watson, he's one of our citizens who works as one of your citizen members. And I want to make sure to encourage everyone not to leave out Harbison, because they're starting to have some issues out there, and we want to make sure that we remind Harbison that they're a part of the city of Columbia.
They are.
Yeah.
They are. And what we'll do is we'll develop, I think when we get through this, the idea is then at our next meeting to talk about all the citizen positions driven and also re-examine how we're doing that so we can make sure that we're getting the right folks in the right positions really to help us move forward. But thank you we'll keep his name on tap. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Yes. Yeah.
The next item 30 is the Tax Modernization Committee, and the clerk and I were just chatting, Mayor, and I'm sure you're about to explain the transition of the existing ad hoc tax study committee to this Tax Modernization Committee and the makeup. You're going to explain that, Mayor?
I'm going to
You're going to
try
try.
to explain it.
Okay.
As we moved into, we're in a position now that, we had an ad hoc committee put together to bring in economists, and now we have an opportunity to sit down with a tax modernization committee. This committee is kind of translating into kind of a longer, but still looking for a 6-month turnaround period with recommendations. But we feel the best way to move forward is to expand the committee to a 7-member committee and making sure that we're having citizens involved with this into the process as we move forward to develop a plan to reduce commercial, small business, and renter homes and apartment property tax to a level that makes Columbia competitive with its peer cities. And part of this we're going to put 4 citizens on that committee along with the 3 council members to work towards a plan and start meeting with the counterparts at both the county and the school board to have a real discussion about how we make a difference and keep us competitive and still make sure that we have the correct resources to take care of all the issues that we have here. And this plan of modernization is strictly, folks, at the non-owner occupied. This is not shifting the tax burden to the homeowner or anybody else. This is strictly about addressing the issue of non-owner occupied. Because we talk about affordable housing and everything else, and the reality is if we don't talk about this, then we're never going to get to that affordability, because the reality is you can't subsidize our way out of this situation, and it's affecting our investment, it's affecting growth downtown, and as we are continuing to see population shift and people invest other places, this is one of the hard topics for us to have a discussion, and that's why we think it's very important to have a comprehensive committee, but a real structure on delivering this in a 6-month period back to council. So we're looking for 3 council members.
2.
So it's got me still on here. I thought the plan had been to originally select 2 and then return somebody to be the chair. I would not be the chair.
I nominate Mr. Taylor.
Mr. Taylor's been nominated by Mr. Duvall.
Hey, jump the gun.
I nominate Howard.
Mr. Duvall's been nominated by Mr. Reverend McDowell.
I would nominate Reverend McDowell.
I'd just like to nominate Mr. Taylor as the chair.
What was that?
Daniel, is that?
So
We got 4. What did she say?
she nominated Mr. Taylor as the chair. We have Reverend McDowell been nominated and Mr. Duvall's been nominated, so we're going to have to take a vote on one of you according to the way we've got it set up on who will take that second slot.
I will defer to Reverend McDowell if he would like to serve on that.
Welcome to the committee, sir.
Thank you, Howard. I got something for you, too.
No, he isn't. Don't let him fool you. He's on a whole bunch.
Let's go with it.
So we have a nomination for Mr. Taylor and Reverend McDowell. Can I get a second for that?
Second.
Madam Clerk?
Mr. Taylor?
Yeah. I'm going to do that second.
Aye.
Ms. Herbert?
Aye.
Dr. Bustles?
Aye.
Mr. Brennan? Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
There was a motion by Dr. Bustles to make Mr. Taylor the chair. I'll second that motion.
Can I ask one question before we
Yes.
do that? You're going to, I mean, is it your intention, Mr. Mayor, for a council person to be the chair of each of these committees? Or would it be possible on some of these cases like this where once private citizen appointees are made that we might defer and put a citizen's? I would yield to your wisdom and your choice on that.
To be honest with you, I would not have an issue if the committee itself wanted to appoint a chair out of the 7 members that not necessarily was a council member. I don't think that's a bad idea. I think the committee together.
And what I would ask, if you're going to vote on the chairmanship, allow the chairman of this committee to what's the word I'm saying?
Just don't vote on it.
Just let me be the acting chairman, if you would, and then let us decide as a group.
In terms of just bringing folk together initially.
I'd like to amend my motion to make Mr. Taylor the interim until the committee meets.
Thank you.
Oh, I have to rescind my motion, and you are
Yeah, you need to
substituting the motion.
rescind yours.
Second. Aye.
Have you got your 4 members?
Well, they only have 3 sitting. There's 4, the others no. We have to.
Daniel's the third one.
Done that yet. Yes.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Herbert?
Aye.
Dr. Bustles?
Aye.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Thank you.
Excellent progress. We are now moving to the appointment of city council members to the external boards or commissions, starting with the Capital City Lake Murray Country Regional Tourism Board.
I'd like to nominate Mr. Taylor
There you go, second one.
to replace Mr. Davis. Did you hear me,
Miss-
Mr.
No,
Taylor?
I heard, I had asked earlier a question of staff about this appointment a while back, and I don't know if I ever got an answer. I think several of us may have had some inquiries from citizens that had an interest of serving on that committee, and the question I ever had was, does it have to be a councilman, or can it be a designee like a lot of the state ones are?
This is an ex officio position.
I know what
and
it is.
they are
I know what it is, Mr. Duval.
They're asking us to appoint a council member. I'm
So
already-
I had a conversation with Ms. Atrium about that, because there is a citizen who has an interest from that area. If council doesn't want to be on it, that they're very much invested in that community and are doing a lot to improve that to work. If there's not a council member who is interested in serving today, I think we ought to have a formal request to Ms. Atrium to allow if we could appoint a designee to that position.
We have to open it up for applications?
No,
No.
that's,
It would be a designee spot. I mean, I
Be a
would,
designee.
Well, and maybe I need to get the background, because I don't know if it's an ex officio that we can designate that to someone
Well, that's
outside
what I'm
the
saying,
council.
we should ask.
well,
I think we should defer it if there's nobody.
and let me say, I don't want to ever imply to a organization that we support that there's not an interest of council to serve.
it's ex officio.
So, I mean, what I would say to you is I would be happy to serve in that ex officio spot if we're unable to appoint a designee. However, if we can appoint a designee and get more citizens' involvement there, that would be my preference.
Well, I'd like to nominate Tina Herbert. That's her district out there, and it's an ex officio position. Ms. Herbert, please take it.
Mr. Duval, I have one feeling left, and you're on the verge of hurting it.
You're on the verge of what?
So what's the question here?
Will you accept the nomination to be the ex officio member with me on the Lake Murray, since that's your district?
So the choices before us tonight are, number one is Mr. Taylor said he would serve after being nominated by you, Ms. Herbert, until we could get a clarification. I think, the question number two is, I think it'd be okay for us to talk to the director and say, hey, you know, there's a real interest to get more people who are invested in that community involved in it. Could we have a designee for that position? If they say no, then it defaults to that. The third option that's been laid on the table is that we have to come to a vote because we have two nominations, yourself and Mr. Taylor.
So it sounds like with that, we do need to defer it and get an answer to that question first.
I am fine with that.
That would be my
I'm glad to
motion.
get us to write a letter, so is that, can we rescind the nominations and go with the motion from Ms. Herbert to request,
I withdraw my nomination.
I just don't want us doing extra work. So let's get an answer to the question, and then once we have the answer.
we're all in agreement on that?
Yes.
So we'll defer this item. With the action item is I'll reach out to Director Atrium, Miriam, and talk to her about the process and what we're thinking, and see if that fits within their guidelines and our ability, or if she would like us to designate that person after we nominate one of our council members for clarification. All right. Next.
Next is item 32, the Central Midlands Council of Governments.
I know that we're looking for two nominees. I know that Mr. Davis served for extended period of time there on the board, and Reverend McDowell has expressed his interest of not serving in the future. So we have two nominees. Is there any, and remember, if we're not ready to make any decisions, we don't have to do it today. I mean, this was the only avenue that we had, since we haven't had a work session to discuss this. So is there, do we have any?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
can we similarly defer this? I move for deferring.
Y'all want to defer?
I'm happy to serve.
Mr. Taylor said he'd be glad to serve if we're interested in that.
Let me just make a comment. I mean, the COG deal, again, our federal lobbyists have left. There's a fairly significant increase in the COG's transportation funding coming with this, you know, the federal money on the Infrastructure Act. I mean, they control a fairly good bit of funds and a whole lot of the planning dollars. So it is in our best interest to be fully engaged with the COG. I mean, I had the honor of being the coordinator of the COGs when I was at the Department of Commerce. So
I nominate Mr. Taylor.
I'll accept that. And I nominate Mr. Brennan. Are you already on it?
He's already on it.
Okay, so we need one more. Doc? Dr. Bustles. I nominate Dr. Bustles.
So I have two nominations on the floor. Dr. Bustles, Mr.
Move the
Taylor.
nominations be closed. Vote on it by acclamation.
Any discussion? So we have two nominations. Are there seconds for those?
Second?
I second.
All right. Madam Clerk?
Mr. Taylor? Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Herbert?
Aye.
Dr. Bustles?
I want to vote for him, but not myself.
We need to split.
All right, well, let's get a new motion on the table or take them up separately.
I'll just abstain, it's fine.
Could you repeat that?
I will
Can't
abstain.
abstain.
Well, I mean, can we split it up and we do each person one by one?
Sure.
What, Mr. Mayor?
She doesn't want to vote
Yes, sir.
On my-
for herself on this one.
I just wanted to add, if I could, to Mr. Taylor's point, and I know, all of your schedules are so tight, but the COG from my time serving on it, and at one point you could, not that I'm suggesting this, but council would designate the manager or staff person to attend as well. It works best, particularly with the opportunities ahead of us, for those who can actually be in attendance, and really that board works with all the governments where the different appointees, they're collaborating, they're voting together as a block, that sort of thing. So I probably should have said this as you were having your discussion, but it really is important for whomever you all appoint to be there at those meetings, and they are normally, I think, on what day, Mr. Brennan, the Thursday?
Third
lunch?
Thursday, third or fourth
What
Thursday.
time, do you know what time it is?
It's a lunch meeting typically,
Noon.
noon, yeah.
That's fine. I will go aye. I'll do it.
I just wanted to make sure you all knew the time, because it is a different meeting time than some.
Bustles doesn't want to serve or doesn't want to vote.
Let me just add, too, I mean, the water and sewer territories are decided by the COGS, too, which are pretty important to the city of Columbia. I mean, this is, and it's one we need to be fully engaged with.
Yeah, and for me, it was the key of being fully engaged. I mean, I'm the chairperson of something that's supposed to have a report, and I want to be very thoughtful about that, and I want to be as intentional and present in everything I'm appointed to. So that's where my hesitation's coming from, though. But if you can support me on this as I'm working on
will,
this,
too.
then I'll be.
I would absolutely,
will,
I would
okay.
absolutely do that, but I completely understand where you're coming from on that report. And I would have to say, having the retired chairman or president of the municipal association on this would be a good thing as well. So, I mean, from a timing perspective, I mean, Howard, one of the things we need to do is use some of our credibility that we have from our private and previous lives on
All
these
right,
things.
Howard said he would do it. So let's withdraw the
I will
motion.
withdraw my nomination of Dr. Bustles.
Yeah, we're drawing Dr. Bustles. We have a new nomination. Mr. Taylor nominated Mr. Duval.
Right, so it'll be a substitute motion to approve Taylor and Duval.
I second.
Madam Clerk,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Herbert?
Aye.
Dr. Bustles?
Aye.
Mr. Brennan? Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great job. Item 33, the Central Midlands Regional Transit Authority, the comment. I will say this up front regarding this one. I think Mr. Brennan's well aware, too, that it's very key, another very key board to have strong participation.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to nominate Councilwoman Herbert.
We have a nomination, Ms. Herbert.
Second.
Any other nominations? Not hearing any. Madam Clerk, could you please read the roll?
nominate yourself?
Huh?
How many
We
places?
just have one.
All right.
One right now.
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Herbert?
Aye.
Dr. Bustles?
Aye.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
And I wanted, Ashley may have to help me with this, just so we're making sure we're in order here. So the seat that we are replacing is interim executive director Huggins' former seat, who is a citizen appointment. So were we okay to appoint a
Yes.
council person? We are,
Excuse me,
okay.
I thought maybe I'm wrong, but I thought we elected or appointed Ms. Herbert earlier to this seat.
We deferred it.
To replace,
We deferred it.
but I thought it was to replace either Councilman Davis or Councilperson Devine's seat.
Neither one of them were on the comment.
Okay, just for
Yeah.
clarification.
Yeah, no, neither one of them were on the comment.
Okay.
Okay, and the next is the Columbia Museum of Art.
I'm going to nominate Dr. Bustles. I don't know if she wants to do it, but I think that it would be a great opportunity for her.
Do we have any other nominations?
I second that.
You good with that, Dr. Bustles? Being nominated, so.
Ready?
Yes, ma'am, we got
Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Herbert?
Aye.
Dr. Bustles?
Aye.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
And our final appointment is to the River Alliance.
I nominate Mayor Rickaman. I think this is a position that needs to be a mayoral position.
I second that.
I gladly serve on the River Alliance. It's a key for our future right now. Is there any other nominations?
Okay. Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Herbert?
Aye.
Dr. Bustles?
Aye.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Thank you.
Well, that wasn't quite as daunting, I think, as we thought, Mayor. Great job. Thank you all so much.
I do want to make sure that at our first available work session that we're working through, because we have quite a bit of vacancies in our committees that are citizen-driven. And so making sure that we're working together to fill those positions. I know we've advertised, but I also think that we need to have an opportunity to sit down with all, especially with all the new council, to talk about the processes, but understanding the voids that we've been missing and making sure that we're getting the best citizen participation that we can to move the city forward. So I'd love to move this boards and commissions vacancies discussion to the first available work session.
Yes, sir. Well, I think I've already put it on my short list for your March 8th meeting.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
with all the wonderful new committees and past committees and future committees, I'd like to just, let's be mindful of staff's time. You know, when we do our regular committee meetings, a lot of staff attends. So I'd really like for us to be mindful and just have the needed staff participate and not
100%
really
agree.
overdo it. So staff, we appreciate all the hard work and preparation that you do for all these committees and all the committees that we are forming today. So thank you so much.
Yes, sir. We appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Brennan.
A point of, just a question for you all. We'd like the public to know, are these added short-term and long-term going to be made available on our website? And who's serving on all of them?
Or the ones that you just discussed and
Yeah.
appointed your own positions to? Sure, yes, ma'am.
That'd be
We'll
great.
Definitely do that. And Mayor Rickaman, I think that was probably it can be a part of the March 8th discussion as well. I know we've got the Columbia Housing appointment and just an overall discussion of the process. So I just wanted to kind of put that out in the atmosphere as well, that's something you all probably need to talk about as a group.
We are currently advertising for that position for the City of Columbia, appointee to the Columbia Housing Authority, correct?
Yes, sir. I know there was maybe a broader discussion too that you all may want to have, but we're simultaneously advertising for it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, Ms. City Manager, just for clarification, so we're talking about having basically a work session and a discussion on the committees and boards, correct? On March the 8th.
Correct.
No appointees, no elections.
Right.
That's
This is
Okay.
purely discussion.
And this is a very nice start on this book. Will we have all the boards and commissions in this for our March 8th meeting?
We can, like every single one that's in existence, every board and commission out there, to include the ones that you just appointed
The
yourselves
ones
to.
we just voted on are already in here.
Right. So any external board or commission.
I think I get caught up sometimes in adjectives. You know,
Okay.
somewhere I read that there were 32 city boards and commissions. I understand from a conversation earlier today, it may be more than that. And that was things like the DDRC, the Planning Commission, all these things that we vote to appoint or elect people to be on.
Yes, sir.
I mean, I'd like to have the whole scope of what we're doing and part of the March 8th, because we just didn't cover this, and our administration,
These key appointees inside your book cover were the ones that for the March 8th, I was focused, and then adding those others so that we actually know, I think, is what our plan is and our hope is.
I'd like to go over the whole, the process of how we generate candidates, and so forth and so on, what some of the qualifications may be on some of these things. And frankly, so we're not operating on a week or 2 week deadline. We need a forward look of 6 months or so on what's coming open, so we have a chance to hopefully encourage more people. I'd like to understand, Mr. Mayor, whether you have to apply or whether you can just be appointed in that whole process.
There've been a lot of questions too from some of the folks serving on boards that have been serving without a full board because we can't find certain positions, and understanding
That's what I'm
those
talking about.
positions and descriptions and how those were put into play, and are those reflective of today? And that's why I wanted to have a work session so we could dive into it, so that we're not just.
Well, and we may
Just
need to
making
ask the question,
appointments.
Mr. Mayor, if some of our boards and commissions' purpose may have waned over the course of time, So, I would expect that to be a fairly long discussion, so.
Well, I think that's why we really want to get it on the first work session, because we do have some operating boards now that are not fully staffed, and it's causing issues. So we need to have that discussion so we can get through. And I think, I'm hoping that the 8th, we can make a lot of traction through understanding each one of those boards better, understanding how the appointment process goes on each one, and also planning in the future. I don't think it's a bad thing at all to be thinking in the future that we start reaching out and planning that we have a position in 6 months, which, one of those is the Housing Authority will have a second position coming up in September. We need to start thinking not only about this appointment, but the next one. So I totally agree, and I think that's why I want to get it on a work session so we can sit around the table and have real discussion. These aren't the ideal situations to be sitting, not facing each other, and having the discussion and understanding the process.
Well, and what I would ask, Mr. Mayor and Ms. City Manager, is that we have a standing policy that at the beginning of a quarter, we're looking a quarter ahead at what vacancies, the council's notified, at least 90 days before a vacancy or a term is going to end. You and I had a nice discussion. I accidentally saw those things when I was looking at one of our city newsletters, the policy on the things closing. And like I said, we were just kind of new into it. So I think we ought to have a standing, if we got a report from the manager's office at the beginning of this quarter for the following quarter of what was going to be available as a standard operating procedure would really be helpful.
So it sounds like a pretty meaty conversation. That work session was also intended for beginning some initial budget discussions. I know you all, I'm trying to be conscious of your time. You've dedicated 2 hours, I think, to those sessions. 3 to 5 is, I think, where you left it. Do you want that first meeting dedicated to boards and commissions now? Or do you want me to add the American Rescue Plan funding item that we
Well,
talked about?
I think we ought to be able to cover those if we are, and if not, we just will shift one back. But I do think based on, what Ms. Woods has provided us, I think it is kind of a critical item piece for us at this point to get this completed.
Okay.
I have a question. Mr. Taylor, is that that standard operating procedure something that you might want to refer to the Administrative Policy Procedure Committee?
Sure, that'd be fine.
When we get to those appointments?
That'll be fine. I don't know that it's necessary. If y'all are having this deeper dive discussion on the 8th, I think we're gonna, that's pretty much something we can begin to do. I think that's the purpose of the work session. It sounds like you all are saying you want to get into maybe how you want to look at a different process or tweaking the process for boards and commissions and the appointments, so, or the advertisement period. I feel comfortable we can handle it there. If you would like to put it in the committee, you certainly can.
Well, no, I was just worried that it was going to be an hour-long conversation just on that one issue. I'm just being honest. So maybe we can determine that in that work session, if it's something that needs to have a further discussion.
Yes, ma'am. I'll do my best to create an agenda for the 8th that I think you all can accomplish within the time allotted.
And Mr. Brennan wanted to know, what time do you plan on starting on March the 8th?
The staff and I will start whenever you all would like for us to start. My understanding from your retreat discussion was that you landed on 3 to 5. Is that correct?
That's the target anyway, as they say.
Are there any other committee referrals or reports?
Anybody else have anything else to refer to?
This isn't a referral or report. You do have in your inbox today from our Budget and Program Management Director, Ms. Kaufman, the hospitality tax process, speaking of processes and committees and all of that. So I know, particularly for the new members of council, we wanted to get this in front of you. And certainly if you have any questions, please let Missy or me know. But she's provided a proposed timeline. That's another committee process that has to get started. So just bringing that to your attention as well.
Thank you. Does anybody else have anything else they want to refer to the stage? I know this has been a little cumbersome, but we needed to get through some of these so that we could get things moving. We're at a point of public input. I know if folks have signed up. Do we have any?
We have Ms. Diane Wiley and Ms. Tremont Miller, Mama G. The two of them have signed up to speak.
All right, Ms. Wiley.
When y'all keep mother happy, I'm happy. I'm happy for what y'all did.
I'm
First, I
sorry,
wanna
Ms.
say-
Wiley, do you mind taking your mask off? I can't hear
Okay,
you.
I'm
Thank you.
happy for what y'all did, but I want to say thank you to the mayor, all the city council, and Madam City Council. But anyway, I want to thank you for what you did. At least we seeing some progress, getting ready to what you got. As long as you keep me happy, you ain't gonna have no worry with me. I'm humble now. Thanks to Mr. McDowell, I call him every day. Don't I, Mr. McDowell?
Yes, ma'am, don't I know?
I call to, I make his phone he can't get a message. But anyway, any of these opportunities as far as committees, I'm willing to work, especially for the homeless and affordable houses. And I have plenty of people back here in the back ready to work. And, you know, they're workers, and they don't mind doing what they need to do. But anything you need us to do, make sure, all of you, I don't care what district it is, I'm retired, I don't care what, I'll be here every day. But I'm not gonna worry you too much, but thank you. And another thing too, the engineers done started coming out in the neighborhood. Thursday, they was out there all day. And they was at the house.
One
The
step
man-
at a time, Miss Wiley, one step at a time, but
One
we're
step
getting
at a
there.
time. The man said, "So you, Miss Wiley?" I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "I done been all around your house." He said, "How did you do this?" I said, "How did the weather do this?" You know, because he almost fell in my separate tank. My separate tank got a big hole in it. And he almost fell in it because I got flowers around it. He was trying to pick a flower out and almost fell in it. So he said that they were working on it. I want to just come and thank you, you know. And
We're
y'all
gonna
working
keep on
really
working.
well. Y'all are really working well. I'm going to be kind of quiet.
No,
It's
you
hard
aren't,
for
Miss
me
Wiley.
to
Don't
be.
tell us that. We know better than that.
That's hard for me to be, but you know, but this is our city. I want to see it. I grew up here. I know everything about Columbia. I grew up on King Street, right in front of Mildred McDuffie. Matter of fact, she used to babysit me. And I grew up there. So I know the city like the back of my hand. But I thank all of you, you know. Anything you want me to do, I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wiley. Next, Madam Clerk, who was next?
Dr. Miller, Mama G. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Rickman. Good evening, Columbia City Council. We of the Rich Program,
They look so much alike.
these two gentlemen with me are second generation Rich. We represent one of the programs, anti-violence, and I want to publicly thank Mr. Simons for supporting us all the time for Columbia Parks and Recreation. We have reached our 10th anniversary of the Peace Pledge that was signed by what is referred to as street-level associations in Pacific Park. That's 10 years ago. And since then, I can proudly say none of our members have been incarcerated, or has there been any violence among the young men who had signed that peace pledge. In the spirit of Black Heritage Month, I would like to salute you, sir, Mayor Rickman, and we have I guess you say, a little token of our appreciation for all that you do and for everybody on council. I hope you enjoy the booklets that are there. We have who here?
Gregory Williams.
Nice to see you both.
And when is our event? The 23rd? And there are letters there for you. So that will be at Pacific Park. And the young men who signed that peace pledge, who agreed to stop the violence here in Columbia, they will be there also. Thank you very much, sir.
Mama
And
G,
I'd
thank you for all you continue to do.
Well, thank you,
And the
sir.
last time I saw you, you were helping out at the BBC.
Yes, sir,
and
Mr.
making-
Perry Bradley, who is
Making
just
sure that the
awesome.
toys were delivered to the kids, and thank you very much for all
Yes,
you
sir.
did with that.
May we hand this to you? and-
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else signed up, Madam Clerk?
No, sir. That's it for tonight.
No recorded? At this point, we'll entertain a motion to go into executive. Mr. Duval?
Mr. Mayor, I make a motion, we go into executive session for receipt of legal advice related to matters covered by attorney-client privilege pursuant to SC Code 30-4-78-2, COVID-19, and Ordinance 2021-021, receipt of legal advice relating to a pending, threatened, or potential claim pursuant to SC Code 30-4-78-2, Alex Smith versus City of Columbia, and State of South Carolina, X-Rail Allen Wilson, Attorney General versus City of Columbia.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing or hearing none, Madam Clerk, please read the roll.
Mr. Taylor? Ms. Herbert?
Aye.
Dr. Bustles?
Aye.
Mr. Brennan?
Yes.
Mr. McDowell?
Yes.
Mr. Duval?
Aye.
Mayor Rickaman?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Where to?